Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast. We get this question a lot, and the question is, what should I do with my house? Is your house worth renovating? And if so, what should I be doing with this house? You know, we have a lot of clients that buy, and this is going to be more towards the single family home. Whether you're about to sell it, selling it in 1 to 2 years, or you just bought it and you just got into your first detached house, we get this question on what should I do to be conscious of not overspending or underspending, and what's going to have the best return on value over the time that I live there. And I'm bringing this topic up because we often sell in this city these post-war 1950 bungalow-style homes that are in many neighborhoods. And, well, quite frankly, they're small. They're undersized from the zoning potential, what you can build there. And I think that they come to mind with these 2,000 square foot homes that are sitting on lots where you can build a 4,000 square foot home. They come to mind as the most common example of, is it worth renovating? And the answer is often, it depends. And it depends on, you know, we had a client that just moved into a dated 60-year-old home that's 2,000 square feet in Burnaby. And if his time horizon's 5 years versus 10 or 20, the answer might be very different. You know, in a 5-year time horizon, he has an undersized home from the development potential. Maybe it's 60% of the size that you can build. So it's, say, 2,000 square feet, you can build 3,500. Is that worth renovating? And if so, what you should do? And my thought on that is, well, we don't know the future, but here's my thoughts on my thought process. As in a 5-year horizon, when you look down the street that you live on, how many new homes do you see? You know, if you see half the homes being new, it's less likely that the buyer for your home 5 years, 10 years from now is going to want to work with the existing home. But if you look down the street and you see maybe 1 or 2 new homes, and most of them are original condition, my thought is, well, you know, it's more likely when you sell 5 years from now that the buyer's that you might get a return on your house. But does that mean that you go full on and make it the best 2,000 square foot home you can? Or does that mean you put lipstick on a pig? I'm going to say that a few times here, Denny. So anyway, this episode could go a few different directions, but what I'm hoping to achieve here is give you some things to think about before you decide what to reno or how to reno a house that may be undersized for its property. And in a lot of cases, if your home is 50% of what you can build, and I think that's a real good number, a guideline number, in a lot of cases, if you have 50%, if you can build a 4,000 square foot lot on or house on your lot, and you have a 2,000 square foot home, in a lot of cases, the answer is going to be do the most budget conscious reno that you can live with. If you need a new kitchen, do a new kitchen, but maybe not replace every pipe and electrical wire connection throughout the home. Whereas if you have a large home, it may be a different story. So
it's important to understand that in these suburb markets, when you're buying a post-war bungalow home, you're spending, let's say, $1.4 million. The house is not what you're paying $1.4 million for. You're paying $1.3 million for the dirt, and you're paying $100,000 for the house. Long term, in 10 years when you go to sell that house, let's say it's worth $1.9 million. Let's say it's worth $2 million. That's land value. The house is a depreciating asset that is going to keep going down every year. The land is an appreciating asset that over time is going to continue to grow. So the longer into the future you hold that property, the smaller percentage of value that when you sell the property, your house, the structure is actually worth.
Yeah, basically, the more expensive the house gets, the more expensive the land gets, the less likely the future buyer is going to value the house that sits there right now. You know, a lot of people that are spending who knows? Maybe in the future it's the same dynamic as we are today. But, you know, oftentimes in East Van, for example, there's 33-foot lots. We sold one in Mount Pleasant earlier not a few months ago for $2 million, and it's going to be torn down. So, you know, essentially, if people are paying $2 million for a 33-foot lot today, and you buy a 33-foot lot with a 1,700 square foot post-war bungalow on it, that's likely to be torn down when you sell it down the road. Maybe you paid, like Denny said, there's 100,000. If you paid 1.5 for it, maybe 1.4 of it is land. I think that's a real good analogy that we run into a lot of time here. So the question is, what do you do with that? You say if you're a buyer, you just bought a 1950s, 60s home that's undersized, you plan on being there for 5 to 10 years. What do you do with it? And I think that a couple things, I don't want to say do everything or do nothing. I think there's an argument to say, well, you know what? If you're going to update kitchen and bathrooms, you might as well replace every pipe and every wire in the house and give the buyer peace of mind that they're going to get updated systems. But if you're going to, that's on the thought that you're going to be there for 5 to 10 years and you're already altering plumbing and electrical anyway, great. Make all the services great. But don't expect to just recognize that if you spend that $25,000 on rewiring your home and $20,000 on plumbing and your renovation, you bought a 1.5 home that's 1.4 land value, $100,000 structure, and you spent $200,000 on the reno, which is a great example. $200,000 is the number we often use for these renos, even though I think it's a stretch that they can get them done in $200,000. I think that has a payback period over the next 5 years. Beyond 5 years from now, I think it's more likely to be torn down. And I'm using 5 years as an arbitrary number, but the reality is that there is a market today for these undersized homes because a lot of people just want to get into a house. But as the prices go up, the buyers want a bigger house, and those houses are worth less.
I think the point we're trying to make, and one of the first questions we ask if people are looking for advice on this stuff is, how long do you plan to live in the home? Did you just have your first child and you plan to be there for 20 years as you raise your family? Do the reno, right? 20 years from now, your land is going to be worth so much that spending $100,000 on a reno, you're not really going to be concerned about it. If you're planning to be there for 5 years, I'd be a lot more cautious on what you spend. Cosmetic renos can help the sellability of a home, especially in slow markets. If you're selling a land value bungalow in a slow market, they could be a very challenging sell versus a kitchen that has new cabinets and new countertops and shiny appliances. It may help the sellability, but it doesn't necessarily get you a huge return on investment. It may just help move that product versus in busy markets, that land value property is going to fly anyway. So it depends a lot on what that time horizon looks like. And if you're planning to be there for 10 to 15 years, raise your family there, do the reno the way you like it. You're going to be happy for the next 10 years or 10 to 15 years. And in that time horizon, you're not going to care that you're not getting a huge return on that $150,000 reno because the land is worth so much more.
Yeah, I think you're right. The longer the horizon, the more it justifies to do it right. When it's a 5-year horizon, kitchen and bathrooms might be perfectly justified. But it's getting into items like rewiring electrical that is working. But if it's 20-year horizon, rewire the whole house or update all the plumbing in the house. If it's 5-year horizon, just do spot do it maybe, where needed. And this is under the assumption that the house is undersized or whatever. But yeah, I think the longer you're there, the more it justifies doing items that may not have a return, like drain tile being one of them. So if you're there for 5 years and maybe that's a lipstick on a pig sort of example where you do the basics, the bare minimum you can to make it look as pretty as you can, recognizing that you're mainly sitting on land value. But if you're there for 10 plus years, rewire, replumb, drain tile, roof, windows, exterior. This post-war 1950s, 60s bungalow that's 2,000 square feet. Oftentimes, if you're getting one that's dated and you're doing a full update on the inside, that's like a $200,000 reno. If it's in Vancouver, maybe it's 3 or 4. If you get to the outside of the house and start working on the siding, windows, roof, drain tile, and landscaping, that $200,000 reno, it does not include all that. That would be an extra $100,000 to $200,000 depending on how far you go with it. So, Denny and I have done a project in Queen's Park, and I've renovated the house I live in, and on the low end, it was like $400,000 between those two examples. So we've done these renos and have yet to crack 200,000 or even 3. And so oftentimes they do get more expensive. So it's really, and I guess it really comes down to the size of your home, the time you're going to be there. And there is a big difference between a 1,700 square foot home versus a 2,200 square foot home. So when you're in that undersized zone, it's a tougher conversation. If you buy a heritage home that's, say, larger than what you can build on the lot, it's a very easy conversation to have. If you have a house that's close to or larger than the zoning potential of the lot, it's just old, my thought is make it the best version it can be. Oftentimes I don't suggest moving walls unless you have to and dealing with extensions and the hard stuff, but make the system, fully update the systems, fully update the bathrooms and kitchen, make it the best home it can be because the structure is a good size. That being said, I think one piece of advice that we would suggest when you do go into reno is checking with your city at what point you might be triggering some unanticipated costs. The costs of doing renos are going up considerably. And I think the examples were, a lot of us that have done them are probably looking at costs from a year or 2 or 3 ago. And I think the next 3 years are going to be a much larger number because, everything's going up, including the process. So, what I mean by that is, one, you might want to find out if your reno, say you're doing a $200,000 reno, you might want to check with the city at what size of permit value will you require me to upgrade my services? For example, in New West, if you have services over 40 or 50 years old and you have a permit over $100,000, that's going to trigger them upgrading your services. And I think it would be important to know that cost because it could be a $40,000 or $50,000 surprise in addition to your reno. So knowing the point where your services get triggered, I think that's important. Also recognizing small renos, even drain tile, can involve months and thousands of dollars even to get to the point where you break ground. You have arborist reports, you have tree barriers set up, you have surveys, these professionals, all these documents that the city requires to just get to the point where you break ground. And if you do have trees that really affect it, you may even have to pay for arborists to supervise the work. So it's, I'd love to say drain tile is $20,000, but it cost Denny and I $35,000 when we did it. And so sometimes it can get more expensive than you anticipate. So I guess they're just recognizing what renos and what permit value might trigger upgrading services, and even doing stuff like drain tile. If you do it the right way with permits, going through all that process, it can be $5,000 before you even break ground. But if the house is a good size, I think it's worth doing in most cases. The only other thing I was going to mention, I think right now, when we're talking about the costs of these renos going up, good contractors are very busy. So if you are thinking about renovating, maybe it's next year, start planning well in advance. So start talking to contractors 6 months, a year in advance. Carl, our producer here, is booked up till next May. He's a contractor when he's not producing our lovely podcast. The contractors book up well in advance, and costs of construction are going higher, not just from the material side. I mentioned some of the city processes and services, but the cost of lumber has gone up considerably. And Carl just gave us an example of a 1/2-inch plywood board that used to be $32 being $70 now. And
and 2x4s. When was it? So it was $2.99 a year ago? It was $2.99 a year ago. Now it's $8 for a 2x4.
Yeah, I just messaged my buddy Jake, who sells Western Red Cedar, and he says that cedar costs for clear cedar has gone up 20%. And that's expensive to begin with. So if the materials going into a house is going up on the low end 20%, I think it's probably 30% moving forward. The materials, the raw costs are going up. The city process is more expensive. You need more. If you have a creek or trees, you're going to need environmental. That's going to go through the roof too. But surveys, all these items cost more money. And then to add to that, a lot of cities are upping their energy energy requirements. So for example, District of North Vancouver, any building permit submitted July onwards is going to need a step code 5 energy efficiency for a new house. That's a higher standard of building than we have required today. That's going to cost more money. So the building code, and not every city's doing that, but the building code in cities. Some cities are going to a higher energy efficient standard. Cost of materials are going up. I'd like to think that contractors are going to get more expensive. Labor is going to get more expensive. Cities are charging more. Everything's getting more expensive. So when I'm seeing that, I think the sooner you do the reno, the less expensive it's going to be. And arguably, in some cases, it makes me feel that the value of good construction, whether that's new construction or well-renovated home that's a good size today, has room to not just appreciate in land value, but appreciate in structure value over the next 5 years. And oftentimes, we were given examples of these 1950 post-war bungalows. Hard to justify them increasing in structure value. But a 100-year-old home or even a 40-year-old, a good size home on a lot, if it has a good layout and it's built well or renovated well, I think that structure value could go up over the coming years just because everything else is going up. And Denny, I went on a tear there. I like it. This construction world is more my passion. So, but anything to add?
You're the construction guru, so I'll just like to let you talk and share.
Yeah.
But for me, the big thing is time horizon. If your house is not taking advantage of the potential of that lot, I think be cautious on how much you spend. That's really what I wanted to get out of this.
I think, and to give you specific numbers, like a quality spec build 4,000 square foot home, if you asked like a builder on what that would cost per foot maybe a year or two ago, maybe the starting would be $150 in a suburb area like New West, Tri-Cities. That might be a couple of years ago. In the last year, that base has probably gone to $200. And I think over the next 3 years, maybe 5, I could see it getting to $250, $300. And I think it would be hard to put up a house unless you're in the game and the house is very basic for $200 a foot right now.
That would be like super basic, and you'd be picking budget finishes and like looking for deals.
And this is suburb prices.
Yeah.
Maybe Abbotsford, Chilliwack is less, but I can assure you Vancouver is north of 3.
Oh yeah.
And in a lot of cases, in the higher tier neighborhoods, it's probably approaching 4+, 400 plus a foot.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it for Is Your Home Worth Renovating? It depends. Talk to a guy like me.